All right, let's jump into reviewing the first React challenge called Detention. So if I open that up, I'm here on the Detention page. Let's go ahead and fork that over to my personal GitHub, and then we'll kind of review what we want to do. All right, Detention. So there's nothing like old-fashioned mental conditioning. In order to emphasize one of the most important rules in React, you will write/render it 100 times. I will never mutate state or props directly. So this means not doing state.count equal 1 or this.state.props equals true. You never want to mutate these directly or change the value of these directly. You always want to use a specific function to do so. So in class-based components, state should be modified using the setState method. For today, we will only be creating class-based components. I'll actually also do it in functional-based components as well, just so you all can see that. All right, so I forked it over to Tom Preet Detention. Let's copy that over. And I'm over here inside of VS Code. I'm going to clear the terminal. I'm going to zoom in so everything's a little more visible. And I'm going to git clone detention 1. I'm going to cd into detention and open that into a new VS Code window. All right, so I've got this git ignore. It has node modules and the README. All right, so I'm going to go over here and look at the README. So the first thing we'll need to do is use the create React app scaffold. So in order to do that, I'm a new developer. It's a how to create a new React app. So I can say npm create React app. So here react.com is the React documentation. React has a really good documentation, but I can come over here and see npx create React app, my app. So the my app is the name of the application. So I can do npx create React app. Let's call this React app called Detention. Let's see if I can spell it right. And let's see how long. It might take a little while to run. That's just the nature of React. It has to install a bunch of libraries. But yeah. Let's keep going. React scripts. It's installing React scripts. So we got it up here. Let's bring that up here. Install template dependencies. All right. Keep going. Now this might take several minutes depending on how much memory your computer has and just how fast your CPU is. All right, great. That's all done. So success, created detention gives us the location of the directory. Yarn start, you can use yarn, but we like to use npm. So let's actually investigate this. So we have our node modules. These are all the npm modules or npm libraries that were installed for React. We have our public.js file, or our public directory. Inside of here, we have our index.html. This is the entry point into our app right here. So inside our, let's just get rid of all this stuff. So React apps are called single page application because inside of this HTML file, inside of this root tag, this is where we're actually injecting our React application. So if you go into our source, open up index.js, app.js as well. I'm going to split the screen there. There we go. So if we look at our package.json file, if we run npm start, it runs this React script library as start, and it should start our application. So I can run npm start. Uh-oh, what happened? Does anybody know what happened? So if I list everything out, notice how I'm in the wrong directory. If I clear the screen and cd into detention, list everything out, now I need to be on the same level as this package.json file. So I'm going to run npm start, and hopefully everything works. So it's all right, starting the development server. Oh. I'm going to come over here and just go to localhost 3000, and here is our React app. All right, so let's look at here. So the first thing we need to do is write I will never mutate state or props directly 100 times. So I'm going to close that. So inside of index.js, we are rendering our app.js component, and inside of our app.js component, it's rendering all of this items. So I'm just going to write hello world right here just to see if it renders anything. Hello. So if I come over here, all right, we have hello world right there. But let's do an h1 tag. And what do we need to render? I will never mutate state or props directly. I refresh that. There we go. I've got I will never mutate state or props directly. Now I can go ahead and do this 100 times. Just copy this down 100 times like so, but that defeats the purpose of using React. We want to do this programmatically. So notice app.js, it comes with a functional based component. This is the way of the future. All components generally going forward are functional based components, but we'll do it first in a functional based component, and then we'll also do it using a class based component, because I'll kind of show you what steps you have to take in order to convert it to a class based component as well. So in here, what we'll want to do, so again, this is just like a normal function if you think about JavaScript. So inside this function, I'm going to create another function called create board. And this is going to be an anonymous function, or it's going to not take in any arguments. And what I want to do is render a bunch of h1 tags. So I can say, hey, let board equals an empty array. And now I can do just a simple for loop for let I equals 0, I is less than, what is it, 100, I plus plus, and now I can do board.push, and inside of here, I'm going to push a bunch of h1 tags, like so. So now I can, let's just, and now I can actually just return board, like so. And now inside of this return statement, this JSX, I'm going to render or call this create board function. So in order to inject JavaScript into JSX, I'll need curly braces, and I'm going to invoke create board like so. And I refreshed it. Now I come over here, and now notice how many times this has been rendered. I can know if it's been rendered 100 times. So let's take a look at what comes in here. So I open up the console. Let's zoom in the console, but I get a warning. So it says each child in a list should have a unique key property. So check the render method of your app. Okay, so I check the render method of the app. Here it goes, or this app function. So anytime you're rendering a list of elements or a list of components, each component needs a unique key property. So inside of here, I can make a key property, and I can each value in this key property needs to be unique. So what I can do, each index is unique. So I can just literally just put index I. And now if I refresh that, I don't get that error anymore. And now if I open up the elements and go into my root, I can see my div with class app. And I can see I will never mutate state props directly, and it's rendered 100 times. Great. So let's keep going with this, and let's separate this h1 tag into its own unique component, and let's render that component. So inside of my source directory, I'm going to create another directory that's just called components. And inside of that directory, I'm going to create a chalkboard text.js component. So literally this chalkboard text is literally just going to render what this h1 tag is doing. I'm just going to kind of show you how a parent component can render a child component. So I'm going to separate that, split the screen right there. And I've got a React snippets VS Code extension installed. So all I can have to type is RSC, and it automatically gives me the skeleton to a functional base component. So I'm going to just move this over to here, get rid of that key, like so. So it already exports default. That's it. And now in here, I'm going to import chalkboard text from components, chalkboard text. And now inside of this h1 tag, instead of rendering an h1 tag, I'm going to render chalkboard text component like so. And let's see if this still works. So create board, loops through, pushes this chalkboard text component, which is this component, which has a div with an h1 tag that just says, I will never mutate state or props directly. So if I come over here, get the same thing, but notice I get that each child in a list key, list error or warning pops up again. I just, again, have to pass that key equals I in here, re-render it, and let's see if it, and now that is gone. So this is a functional based component, but inside of here, it says we will only be creating class components. So let's show you kind of how I can convert this functional based component into a class based component. So I'm going to say functional based component. And down here, I'm going to just create a class based component. So the first thing I'll need to do is import component, the component class from React. Just like in Django, when we're importing forms or models, we're importing a component class from React. And now, in order for this this class, this app class, to inherit from the component class, I can say, hey, class app extends. So I'm extending the component class into the app class, like so. And we're in a functional based component, it has a return and just returns JSX. A class-based component operates a little bit differently. It will always return a render method that is always invoked at the very end of this app component. So I'm going to copy that down here, or copy the div like so. Let's format that. All right, I'm getting an error. Why is that? Oh, because this render method needs to return some JSX. So it always invokes this render method. But now it says, hey, this create board is not defined because within inside of this class-based component, this create board method isn't created yet. So in here, instead of const, you can't declare variables within a class in JavaScript. Same thing with, yeah, you can't just like const some variable equals something. Can't do that. Let's create a function. In order to declare a function, we just can say create board, and you want it to be an anonymous function because it uses like this keyword, and anonymous functions binds the context of this to where it's actually being called. So we'll get into it in a future lecture. So in here, in this create board component, we can do the same thing that we're doing up here between lines 9 and 13. And do that. Create board. But now create border is giving me a little squiggly error because in classes, it doesn't know what create board, what it's attached to. Just like the self keyword in Django or Python, the classes in JavaScript utilizes the this keyword. So it needs to know what instance does create board belong to, and it belongs to this app instance. So yeah. So always need the this keyword when utilizing class-based components. So if everything worked, everything is still working correctly. So class-based component, I can also convert this, the chalkboard text, into a class-based component. So functional based, oops, spelled that wrong. Based component. Functional based component. Let's do the same thing down here, but let's make it a class-based component. So I can do class chalkboard text extends component, and notice how it automatically imported that up top, and then it's going to render a return, and that return is just going to be this div right here. Whoop. I'm just going to clean that up like so. So this class-based component will always execute this render method at the very end. And I come up here and it works directly. Everything works the same. And if I wanted to, I can comment that out, and you can utilize class-based components with functional-based components in conjunction with one another. So like where app is a functional-based component, but chalkboard text is a class-based component, doesn't matter. They still work the same. Great. And let's see what else. So we wrote it 100 times. Maybe we wanted to, instead of writing 100 times, maybe when we wanted to pass it in a number of how many times we want it to render, and we can only render it, 15 times. So create board function takes in an argument that is a number. It's called 15. Comes into here. Create board 15 takes in 15. Runs a for loop 15 times. And now if I come over here, it only rendered it 15 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. So you can do a simple for loop here. There's another way we can also do it using the word a return. Let's see. Never mind. Disregard. We'll get into that a little later. All right. So that is. So that's detention using functional-based components and class-based components. Right now, there's still a lot to learn, but that's a good intro. I'm gonna